LOBB Stories, we walk and we talk with inspiring and forward-thinking people.
I walk very fast. I walk extremely fast. I eat fast, I walk fast. I drive very slow though, but I walk very fast. I used to live fast, but now I'm I guess I live at a slower pace.
In this first episode, we walk in Jardin de Luxembourg in Paris with French artistic director Thomas Lenthal. We talk magazines, good taste, and bespoke shoes. Welcome to the John LOBB podcast.
I'm an art director. I've always been an art director. I went to a graphic design school that was supposed to turn out art directors, and I became an art director. So I've always been in this profession. I've always my first job was in a magazine, in a fashion magazine, and ever since I've always been close to magazines and fashion magazines. I mean, these days I with a group of friends do a magazine that's based in London that is devoted to the business of fashion somehow, and it's called System Magazine. And it's a biannual, is trying to, I guess, dig somewhat deep in the subjects we choose to cover. Doing a biannual allows you to take your time and, I guess, do the job properly. I think it's a good format for magazines these days. I used to work in a monthly back when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, I guess. And now it's a biannual. I think as a child, no, I was a draftsman. I was a really good draftsman. I used to draw all the time, and I was quite good at it. And then somehow this talent left me. And so, but I was always very, very keen on visual things and very, very triggered by looking at things in general, also looking at still things like paintings and photography later on, but as a starting point, probably painting more so because my father was dealing in old masters, and so I would, as a child, see a lot of that around at the house and in museums also. Walking in museums with my father was something I used to do a lot as a child, and so I guess it triggered a deep interest in painting and drawings and stuff, but in general in all things visual. And a sense of quality and, you know, furniture, interiors. Yeah, I suppose all things visually appealing. I was educated in a certain type of taste, I suppose. Is that good taste? I don't know what good taste is. I know what good taste means these days, and there's a very bourgeois connotation to good taste, and there's probably truth to that, I suppose. So educated in a bourgeois taste, yes, probably. I don't know if that's good taste. When I got out of art school, I was my photography teacher was a great Swiss man called Peter Knapp, who back in the 60s and 70s was the art director of French Elle and French Vogue. When I met him, when he was my teacher, he was the art director of various magazines at a French publishing house that was called Philippe Aki, Hachette Philippe Aki. And he was the art director of a fashion magazine called Femme, a fashion magazine that would actually mix quite a bit of culture with fashion, which was fairly not so common back then, I think in the early 80s, in France at least. And so it was a very interesting experience, and from then on I became, I guess, an art director for fashion magazines, for magazines in general. And so My first job was with him at FAM. It was a very different time because you have to understand that digital didn't exist. It was still something that felt like science fiction. It wasn't what we were doing. We were still very much cutting papers, gluing, pasting, doing photo repro, and so on and so forth. There was no computer in sight. Not even that was early 80s. There is probably not even a computer at the accounting department. It was very, very artisanal. It was, well, artisanal is a big word because artisanal implies a sense of deep quality in the execution. I mean, cutting and pasting doesn't require amazing artisanal skills. That's not what we were doing, actually. We were just, but it was still very, it was a measure of handicraft. I think buying my first pair of John LOBB felt like amazing. But to a certain extent, yes. Being in a position to thanks to the money you were making as a very young man, doing what I was doing, being able to acquire something like that felt really, really good. I think I was probably in my really early 20s, probably 22, 23, something like that. And I had a friend who was a very good photographer, sort of very traditional black and white, Hasselblad and so on and so forth, who had taken pictures at LOBB back then. And he introduced me to the last maker at LOBB, who was called Jean-Pierre Suire, who was a larger-than-life character, very handsome man with a leather apron, very strong, very funny, very endearing character who was just really taking care of clients at LOBB Rue Boissy-d'Anglas back then. And he was a very welcoming guy. There was nothing too impressive about it. He was really gentle and nice and welcoming and fun. And I looked at this amazing cupboard, a glass cupboard, where they had probably around 100 or 200 pairs of beautifully aged bespoke LOBB shoes. And I decided on a pair of brown brogues. Brown shoes, especially when they're very old, they tend to get an amazing patina, which you don't necessarily get with black shoes. And so in that huge cupboard, all the brown shoes looked incredible. They had all the colors of honey and brandy, and they were really like chestnuts and stuff. It was a very, very attractive thing about all these shades of brown. And there was a pair of brogues in there that looked amazing. They must have been like, I don't know, 60, 70 years old, baking in the sun for forever. And also you have to, I suppose, imagine what style meant in the 80s, and there was a lot of Anglomania was still very much the thing. And so I think those brown brogues, to me as a little Parisian boy, they just exuded everything English. Back then, I think I had corduroy trousers and tweed jackets, yeah. So it felt like very kind of country squire, or what a French person would imagine an English country squire would dress like, which was always like not at all what a real English country squire would wear. It was just this sort of French fantasy of what an Englishman would be wearing. I had a program. The next pair had to be a pair of Oxfords, completely unadorned, very simple black Oxfords, very plain. So to me, that was the starting point of the whole idea of almost wanting every single shoe that made sense within a gentleman's wardrobe. So those were the two starting points, because each of them would be actually the matrix of everything else.
In LOBB Stories, we walk and we talk with inspiring and forward-thinking people.
It's interesting. I think, yes, I think in a sense, in what I do, there's a measure of restraint, usually, and if I have a style, it's a fairly, it's fairly invisible. And I suppose it doesn't show off. It's fairly invisible. It's not very loud, and so on and so forth. So it is probably a reflection of that as well. I mean, they're both. I don't know what was first, but it's sort of, yes, it makes sense, I suppose. It's like the clock. There's a clock that's stopped at once a day, gives you the exact hours. So I suppose my thing is a bit the same, whereas there are moments where I'm completely out of sync with what's happening, and then the cycle comes back to something that's more in the vicinity of my style, I suppose. But you can't. I mean, you could, but I couldn't. I couldn't imagine like running after what's currently the thing. That would be extremely tiring, I suppose. I could go crazy for cowboy boots, for instance, and so I would have cowboy boots ordered from some good Western boot makers in America, and so I've done that. Style crazes, no, sometimes you get an urge to get yourself some shirts. Some of them end up being questionable choices that you never wear. But in general, I think that my wardrobe has been something I've been building over the past 30 years, and it's, you know, there's still here all my suits and my shoes and my ties and all of it. So it never, to me, it never feels old because I have quite a few of them. Yes, of course. Like Madras jacket, I love them, but I feel like an idiot when I wear them. I own them, but I wear them very seldom. But I can't bring myself to hate them. They're just great, but it's just a thing. I think my wife doesn't enjoy seeing me wearing them, and you have to pay attention to these things as well. I read a lot. I watch. I go to the movies. I watch a lot of films. I tend to think that I'm fairly well informed of what's going on, specifically in the world of fashion, given what we're doing with systems. So that keeps you, whether you like it or not, in touch with the now, if you want to use this term. So yeah, I think it's. I think it's exciting to see new things, for sure. Was it better before? I think it's a mind pattern to think it was better before. When you read books by great authors from the turn of the century, I'm not talking about the last century, but the one before, they were already bitching about the fact that things were better before. I remember, and that was kind of an epiphany for me, reading Proust talking about how ugly the promenade on the Bois de Boulogne was back in 1905 because it was filled with automobiles. And it was nothing like the splendor of it before the automobile came about and the horse carriages and all that. So he was already bitter and mad at modernity back then. I think it's a slippery path. Even though it's a natural tendency, I'd rather avoid it because it makes you very, very sad. I think some of the work of some of my colleagues, I find very, very beautiful. I think I'm very often in awe of certain visual solutions for great brands done by some of my more or some of my very talented colleagues. Yes, that I find very beautiful, and I'm very impressed with that. You know, I'm sometimes impressed by what I see in movies. Music has never been, pop music has never been something I was too involved with. It always bored me. I was more of a visual kind of person, so you know what? It's a very tiny thing, but I found myself being captivated by the Instagram account of Urs Fischer. He does these 3D little animations of objects that have nothing to do with one another. It's always coupling two objects. I thought it absolutely mesmerizing and a very interesting take on the contemporary world. And both aesthetically very attractive and seductive, and I think conceptually very rich, and you can't really get your head around it, and it opens to a lot of interpretations, which I think is what makes art art. Well, I had a strange moment, but what I think in general is that the shape of your shoes should be in keeping with your physique in general. In other words, a big stocky gentleman should not wear pointy shoes. That's ridiculous. Well balanced. There is a harmony in the whole thing. The way La Place de Concorde is harmonious, the shape of your shoes should be a reflection of the shape of your body, basically. What are those that I'm wearing? Actually, one of the last pairs of LOBB that I had made here in Paris, and it's a pair of actually wingtip brogues, black, very, very classic, but more for the summertime, so with a lighter construction and a thinner sole. And that's the beauty of well-made things, is that you can keep them for a lifetime, and maybe 2 lifetimes, maybe 3, who knows. Well, the thing is, I always like to look at them in my wardrobe. It's a nice... I remember there's this picture of Adolphe Menjou in front of his shoe collection. You know, he was a Hollywood actor, and he was a very fine dresser. And he had this big cupboard full of amazing shoes. And there's a picture of him very proud in white tails, posing next to his shoe collection. It's quite absurd, because it's something quite childish to see a grown-up man being in love with his shoe collection. But there's something very strange with shoes, and people who love shoes. I haven't trying to analyze it too deeply, because it would probably cause embarrassment. How many shoes? I don't know. Too much, too many. That is a point where I'm not being, I suppose, sufficiently restrained. That is my vulgarity.